Welcome to Leading Your Culture with Bill Nye. This episode is brought to you by Multifamily Media Network, delivering the latest news, ideas, and inspiration across the multifamily sector. Now let's go ahead and jump into the next episode of Leading Your Culture with Bill Nye. Hello and welcome to another edition of Leading Your Culture with Bill Nye. I'm your host, Bill Nye. So it's been quite a while since I've recorded a podcast. It's been several weeks, at large part because, quite frankly, I've been on the road for 7 straight weeks. So I'm a full-time speaker. It's all I do for a living. And if I'm not on the road speaking somewhere, then I'm not making a living. And so I'm very lucky and very fortunate to have spent the last 7 weeks traveling around the country doing what I love to do and quite frankly, what I get paid to do. But also, I don't want to record an episode or have a guest on simply for the fact of, well, I need to do another podcast. I need to have more content out there. I don't want to waste your time with an episode that, quite frankly, just doesn't bring any real impactful value to you as the audience. And so, I try to be very mindful of your time and try to be mindful of that. And make sure that when I do have a guest on or when I'm recording something, it's something that I believe is very important. And that's certainly the case today. So we're going to talk about mental toughness because I see all over the country, as I travel speaking for companies and speaking at conferences, I see a lot of sessions on mental health. And I'm not going to be critical of that, as a need, but I think we're selling the wrong thing. I think we're trying to, give this idea that employers have a responsibility for the health of their employees. And I think in some cases that's true. If you're a coal miner, I think that's certainly true. I think having a safe environment, and that's why we have, the EPA, that's why we have OSHA, we have other government agencies to ensure that it's a safe and healthy place for people to work. But my personal health is my personal responsibility. It's my job to make sure I'm eating right, I'm exercising, and I'm also not filling my mind with junk that's going to make me angry or cause me to dive into, a deep level of sadness and potentially even depression. Although I think that's another one. We overuse the word depression. Sadness is a part of life, but sadness and depression are two very different things. One of the things I've noticed over the years is that we're constantly sensationalizing people's experiences. You see this on social media. You see this on reality TV. Think about the TV show The Bachelor. Years ago, when The Bachelor and the Bachelorette would go on a one-on-one date, they would spend that date having a conversation about who they are, what they want out of this, what their goals are, getting to know one another. And if you watch a show today, it's all about what I call their victim story. It's all about, some of the, less enjoyable, less pleasant, less positive aspects of life. And find me a human being on earth who hasn't had some kind of an unpleasant experience. Years ago, 2001, in fact, I got a phone call from my oldest son, Charles. It was a Wednesday evening. He was graduating from high school in about 48 hours. And he called me just to say he was on his way home with his best friend from high school, a young man by the name of Jason. And, all these years later, Charles and Jason are still very good friends. And so he just wanted me to know he's on his way home. Well, we were living in Raleigh, North Carolina, and they had just opened a new section of I-540, which is the outer loop that runs around Raleigh to help with the traffic congestion. And they just opened a new section that literally ran behind our neighborhood. And just, maybe 10, 15 minutes after I received that phone call, I'm outside and I hear brakes, I hear tires screeching, and I hear this just tremendous crash. And you could tell there was a car accident up on 540, and you could tell it was most likely very bad. Well, my first thought was, gosh, I suspect that Charles and Jason may be on that stretch of the highway on their way home. And I couldn't not go up there and check and make sure that my son and his friend weren't involved in this. So I ran across the yard and through a field and hopped over a fence and jumped over a small creek and had to go up the berm up onto the highway through, some big, huge pine trees that they had planted, to kind of help with the noise. And traffic had completely stopped on the highway. And so I ran across the two lanes closest to me, across the median into the other where traffic was going the other way towards our exit. And traffic stopped going that way. And as I got up there, I noticed a group of people just standing almost in a perfect half circle, just standing there. And I didn't know what they were doing. I saw a van off to the side of the road, and the front end of this van was just smashed in. And so I kind of squeezed between two people, and I saw this little convertible sideways in the road, and it had crossed over the median into oncoming traffic and on its side and got T-boned by this van. And the top was down in the convertible. I'll never forget the license plate. The license plate said "Fun to Drive," F-U-N, and number 2, D-R-V-E, Fun to Drive. And there were two teenagers in the back seat. They had both passed away. There was a young lady in the passenger front seat, and she had also had passed away as a result of the impact. But the driver was still alive, and everybody was just standing there. And so I immediately went to the driver and I started to do what I could to help. And while I was trying to help him, he too passed away. I'll never forget the first responder to show up was a North Carolina state trooper, a highway patrolman, and he came to the car and he stood on the passenger side. I was at the driver's side, still holding the driver who had passed away. And he checked on the two in the back. He checked on the young lady in the front seat to see if there was a pulse. Of course, I knew there wasn't. I'd already done that. And he looked at me and kind of made a gesture to ask if he was still alive, and I just shook my head no. And the highway patrolman put his head down, his hands resting on the car, and he looked back up at me, and the highway patrolman was crying. This was a traumatic event. Excuse me, I'm dealing with some allergies. This was a traumatic event. I don't talk about this very often, but I've never forgotten about it. When I drive on that section of 540 when I'm back in Raleigh, I'm always reminded of that night. And of course, I was relieved that Charles and Jason were not on that highway, but that did not make up for the fact that I was just sick to my stomach that 4 young people had just lost their lives. Turns out they were drag racing and lost control, and that's why they went across. And I found out that the driver was in 48 hours supposed to graduate with my son and his friend Jason. That's real trauma. And, getting through that, the family, those who witnessed it, those who were involved in it, and even me being there and trying to do what I could to help, I had to be able to deal with this and move past this. What I'm learning today and what I'm hearing as I travel around the country is that people who are in leadership positions, managers, supervisors, they're constantly dealing with the feelings and emotions of their team. This is a true story. I had someone share with me that they had an employee who came to work and about an hour after getting to the office said to the manager, to the supervisor, that she needed to go home. And when asked why, it's because when she stopped at the coffee shop to get her coffee, they were out of what she wanted. And she was just having a really bad day and just needed to go home. I think that we need to focus on resilience. You can call it mental toughness, but the real thing we need to focus on is resilience. Here's a couple of interesting things to think about as you watch and listen to this podcast. In the 1960s, there was a study done. They took a group of people and they broke them into 3 groups. And they put them in the room. And the first group, they were subjected to a really loud noise. And in front of them was a buzzer. All they had to do was press the buzzer and the noise would stop. Well, guess what happened? They pressed the buzzer, the noise stopped. They brought in the second group, put them in a different room, or maybe the same room, I'm not, but they deactivated the buzzer. The buzzer didn't work. And so they go into the room and they hear the loud noise, and someone figured out that maybe we should try pressing this button. And they did. And well, nothing happened. The noise continued. They took them out of the room. They took away the buzzer. They brought in the next group, and no noise, no buzzer. They just sat there, not exposed to anything. They bring these groups back in the next day. Same groups, put the first group in the room with a different way of stopping the noise. All they had to do was move their hands, and that would cause the noise to stop. Somehow they figured it out. They moved their hands, the noise stopped, they win. The second group, the group that had the buzzer that didn't work, the noise started, and they literally just sat there and endured the noise. This is what's known as learned helplessness. It exists in humans and it exists in animals, where my situation is so bad, there's nothing I can do about it. I can't make my situation any better. I can't change a thing. That's called learned helplessness. I'm a victim. I'm helpless. The third group, who had no noise the day before, had no clue what to do. They were subjected to the noise, and they too figured out that I can raise my hands and the noise will stop. And so I think when we're dealing with our employees, we experience these types of groups. We experience these groups who learn how to make things better through previous experiences. We work with people who, no matter what, they have no hope. They have no chance of winning. They have learned helplessness. I am a victim. There's nothing I can do to make my situation better. And then there are others who they're experiencing something for the first time, but they have a natural or an innate sense of optimism that, hey, I don't know what this is. I've never encountered this before, but I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to fix this, or I'm going to make this better. So the Army in the 1980s, the Army did a study, and they came up with a program. It's called Comprehensive Soldier Fitness. Because what the Army learned was that our troops are exposed to super traumatic experiences, and they learned that there are three ways of responding to these traumatic experiences. One way is, for instance, if there's a movie out right now, it's called Warfare, and it's based on an actual experience in the Middle East of a group of Navy SEALs. And their traumatic experience of being basically locked up, if you will, or stuck in a house while they're under heavy attack. Members of their unit are killed. Other members are traumatically injured, losing limbs. It was just an awful experience. And so through this, what the Army has learned is that there are three things that happen. One is that you sink into high anxiety, depression, sadness, but eventually you return back to normal. You kind of work through it and you get back to normal. So, you start here, you sink to here, but eventually over time, through help, counseling, so on and so forth, you get back to here. They found there's another group that they start here and they sink down because of the traumatic experience, but then they do something about it and they actually come back stronger and better. That's where Friedrich Nietzsche said, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And that's really the premise or the belief behind that. But then the third group, they sink into depression, sadness, and unfortunately far too often they fall into suicide because they have what's known as learned helplessness. There's nothing I can do to make this better. I can't fix this. I can't live like this anymore. And it's just a place of just total defeat and total loss. And it's just awful. And it's terrible when that happens. And so, I think about my other son, Don, when he was in high school. Not that this is on the same level of, losing a loved one or anything like that. Certainly never going to trivialize, that level of trauma. But my son Don was an exceptional high school football player. He was his junior and senior year. He was all conference. His senior year, he was conference defensive player of the year. Was being recruited to play college football. He was just a fantastic high school football player. And Don's junior year, his team won a lot of games, had a winning record, went to the state playoffs, and ultimately ended up losing to one of the best teams in the state. I believe, if I remember correctly, they lost that game in overtime on a field goal. Just a awful defeat. And I remember those young boys coming off the field, and these 16, 17, 18-year-olds, some of them were crying. They were just really distraught. But overall, it was a great season, and they learned a lot from that season. So now, it's my son's senior year, and he's captain of the team. And if I remember correctly, they won one game. Just a terrible, terrible season. When the season is over, I had a conversation with Don. And I remember saying to him, you learned a lot your junior year. But sometimes we learn our best lessons through losing. We learn our best lessons by not getting what we want. And one of the things you learn is that you can work hard, and he most certainly did. You can give 100% effort every single play, every single Friday night, and he most certainly did. You can be incredibly talented, and he was. You can want it really bad, and he certainly did. And it still doesn't go your way. I think about myself as a speaker, and I get contacted occasionally from organizations inquiring about my services coming out. And most of the time, they're not just considering me, they're considering other speakers. And I will say, knock on wood, I'm grateful for the fact that I think most of the time when a client reaches out to me, they end up hiring me. But that doesn't always happen. I can want it. I can be talented. I can have a great session. I can think I'm right for them. And it still doesn't work out the way I want it to, right? Because that's how life is. Nobody wins all the time. We all go through, the coffee shop's not going to have what you want. The person driving in front of you is driving like an idiot, not paying attention, swerving lanes, cutting you off, whatever the case might be. How do you respond to these moments? And do you see them as defining moments, or are they just part of life? Because quite frankly, a lot of what I'm hearing and seeing and observing is a lot of what people categorize as trauma in their life is quite frankly just an ordinary event in life. My son's season, I think they were like 1-9 or 1-10. It was a terrible season. And sometimes that's just how life works out. You don't get what you want. But when the Army began to put together this program called Comprehensive Soldier Fitness, they learned 4 things. And I think these 4 things are very true. And I want to share them with you because as leaders, I think there's a couple of things that are really important in terms of leading your team and helping your team to understand that you're not always going to get what you want. It's not always going to work out the way you want. You're not always going to get a yes to the sales pitch. Things aren't always going to go your way. And these 4 things they learned that really depend on where a person lands. Remember the 3 groups. The group that experiences a trauma, they drop into anxiety, sadness, sometimes even depression, but they come back to where they were. Then the group that experiences it and then comes back even stronger. What doesn't kill us makes us stronger. And then the 3rd group, those who just can't ever get back. They live in that area of sadness, victimhood, sometimes even depression, anxiety, and unfortunately, even sometimes, as I said, with 22 times a day, a veteran in this country takes their life, and it's just awful. So 4 things. Number 1, what they learned in trying to build this program out to where their soldiers, Marines, sailors, airmen like myself can bounce back. And by the way, before I forget, I'll tell you real quick. Well, I'll tell you number 1, and then I'll share this story. Number 1 is a natural sense of optimism. I think it's important for leaders to have that sense of optimism. Yeah, the market's tough. Yeah, these costs have gone up. Whatever the case might be. But if we do A, B, and C, I am certain that we're going to be okay. So, I crewed on a C-141 Starlifter when I was in the Air Force. And I remember one mission, shortly after takeoff, we took a direct lightning strike to the nose of the aircraft. We had lightning strips on the nose cone of the C-141, and because, there's just certain parts of the plane where if you're going to get hit by a bolt of lightning, it's better to get hit there than other places. And so these lightning strips are to minimize or mitigate what happens to the aircraft if you take a direct lightning strike. And lo and behold, here we are on takeoff, and bam, a bolt of lightning hits the plane, and it blew the nose cone completely off the plane. There are two hinges at the bottom and two locking bolts at the top, and or it might be the other way around. I can't remember now. It was many, many years ago. But anyhow, where those two hinges are and those two bolts, there were chunks still attached to the plane, but the rest of the honeycomb nose cone was completely gone, which meant we're no longer aerodynamic. We're now flying with a very flat front with our radar, fully exposed. And so what do you do in that moment? Well, I think the most important thing is for the pilot to be optimistic. We're going to be okay. We're going to turn this thing around. We're going to fly a big loop, and we're going to come back, and we're going to land, and we're going to be. The one thing you can't do is you can't stop flying the plane. You cannot stop flying the plane. You can't just lay down and say, I didn't plan for this. This scared me. This is too hard. This is the moment when you have to show your mental toughness and say, that was terrible, but we're going to be okay. And guess what? I'm sitting here today. I'm okay. We landed that plane, and I'll never forget that moment. I'll never forget that experience. But what I also won't forget is that we all knew we were going to be okay. We all did our jobs with a sense of optimism. This is not a great experience. This is not an optimal outcome. No one planned for this, but we're going to be okay. And we were okay. We landed the plane, and we all lived to tell about it. So number one is recognizing that it's important to be optimistic. And this is really important for the leader. So for anybody out there who's listening and watching this podcast, this is your job, to be the optimist. That doesn't mean that you give false hope. It doesn't mean that you lie, but you're optimistic. Yes, this is bad, but we're going to be okay. It's not the end of the world. They didn't have your coffee. It's going to be okay. Look, here's $3. Go buy an energy drink. But be optimistic. Don't just give in to it. One of the things I say all the time as a leader is, I care about your feelings, but I won't be held hostage by them. And when you give in to people's feelings, you're constantly being held hostage by those feelings. And that doesn't serve anyone well. That doesn't solve the problem. That doesn't fix anything, which leads to number two. Understand that life always has a fork in the road. And what that means is that you understand that the moment something goes wrong, you're not helpless. You have a choice. You can either choose the road of helplessness, victimhood, this will never get better, or you can choose the road of, what can I do to make this better? Maybe I'm not going to get the outcome that I ultimately wanted, but I'm not going to allow this to define me. This isn't going to be the moment that destroys my career. This isn't going to be the moment that causes me to quit. One of the things I posted on LinkedIn the other day is changing jobs is not the same thing as quitting. Sometimes people find themselves in a culture that isn't right for them. It doesn't work. So they find another job. That's not quitting. Quitting is giving up. Quitting is falling into sadness, victimhood, anxiety, maybe even depression. Again, I'm very reluctant to use the word depression because I think we overuse it. Depression can be just totally crippling. Look, I've been sad. I've been very sad over experiences in my life to the point to where I lost my appetite. I had trouble sleeping, but I did eat. And I did sleep. I didn't eat as much because I had a limited appetite. I lost some weight. I didn't sleep like I normally do, but I did sleep. I could still function. I could get up and go to work. I could cut my grass. I could go, go grocery shop, and I could do the things that I have to do. When people become depressed, it becomes debilitating where that they can't do those things. And so that's why I'm so reluctant to use that term. But understand, number two, that life comes with a fork in the road. And that fork, it comes at us in moments that maybe we didn't see it coming. We didn't expect it. It's not like you look up and say, oh, there's the fork. The fork just comes out of nowhere. That bolt of lightning came out of nowhere. But that was a fork in the road moment for us. What are we going to do? We're going to freak out, panic, give up, and let the plane crash into the ground and kill all of us? Or are we going to stay focused and do our job and come back around and land? And we stayed focused, did our job, and we landed the plane. But that was a fork in the road moment. When that car accident happened, that was a fork in the road moment for me. And I remember asking myself, why did I go up there? Because seeing what I saw and holding that 17-year-old boy, literally my arms wrapped around him, talking to him, trying to encourage him to hold on because help was on the way. That had an effect on me. And I asked myself for a few days over and over and over for the next couple of days, why did I go up there? And then I remembered why I went up there. I went up there because I was concerned that maybe my son and his best friend were involved in an accident. That was a fork in the road moment. And now that I look back on that moment, although I was not able to save that young man, I was able to offer some comfort to his family. I had a conversation with his mother a couple of years later and told her about that encounter. She didn't know me. I didn't know her. And a mutual friend put us together, and I was able to share with her, those last moments with her son and the things I said to her. And she cried, she hugged me, and she thanked me for that. And, that brought her some level of comfort. I remember she said she believed that her son died in that car alone without anyone trying to help. And then when the two of us met, she realized that was not the case, and that brought her some level of comfort. That was a fork in the road moment, that night. Go up there or don't go up there. And even though it haunted me for a while, now years looking back on this, I'm glad that I went up there. That was a fork in the road moment, and I chose to do something instead of doing nothing, sitting in the living room full of fear and anxiety, worried until my son pulls into the drive. So I'm actually glad that I went up there. Number three is making sure that you have strong relationships. The one thing I've learned is that having people around you who love you, support you, will listen to you, encourage you really matters. It's important. Don't isolate yourself. Have those strong relationships. It's important to have strong relationships at work. It's important to be able to share, your frustrations, your mistakes, your fears, be honest and be real, but not give up. Those strong relationships really matter. One of the most admirable human beings, or two of the most admirable human beings in the world, Mike and Kelly Durham. And I've told Mike and Kelly's story many, many times. Several years ago, they gave birth to a son, little boy named Carter, full-term birth. Carter was born with a very rare neurological condition that ultimately cost him his life. At 3.5 years of age, their son Carter passed away. And the relationship they had with each other, with her parents in particular, her siblings, after this happened, this is kind of a fork in the road moment, right? What do? This tears a lot of couples apart. But the thing that I'll never, ever, ever forget and have so much respect for is that after Carter passed away, they became foster parents. Rather than sinking into that, depression, that anxiety, that victimhood, they said, we're going to open our home and we're going to be loving parents to children who don't have a loving home. And for many years, they fostered countless number of children with terrible stories in their home. And a lot of it is because of those strong relationships that they had. And I'm so grateful to have them in my life and consider them two of my closest friends. In fact, Mike is on the board of directors for the charity that I founded called Hero Trees 214, where we provide or will be providing, as we get this set up, we'll be providing free Christmas trees to veterans around the country every year at Christmas time. And Mike is on the board of directors. He's our vice president, and just a great human being. He and Kelly both. But it's because of those strong relationships they were able to get through the trauma of losing their son. And now they have two beautiful girls, and they have Jackson, who they adopted. So they have, a family of three, and just an incredible family. And number 4 is perspective. Man, that's so important, perspective. Yeah, something went wrong on your way to work this morning. Something didn't go your way. You made a stop and they didn't have your coffee, or whatever the case might be. I'm a huge baseball fan. I've talked about this often on my podcast. I love the New York Yankees. I wanted the Yankees to win the World Series so badly last year. I was so excited that for the first time since 2009, my favorite baseball team, playing in the World Series against Los Angeles Dodgers. I was at Game 4 at Yankee Stadium. I'm back home watching Game 5. They're winning 5-0. Garrett Cole's on the mound. Things are going our way. They win this game, and they go back to Los Angeles down 3-2 with a chance to win the World Series. They lost Game 1 in extra innings, a game they probably should have won. So excuse me. I'm feeling optimistic about how it goes, and then a line drive is hit to center field, and Aaron Judge goes to catch a ball and hits off the edge of his glove. It's an error. A few hitters later, a ground ball hit to Anthony Rizzo. He goes to flip the ball to Garrett Cole at first base. Garrett Cole doesn't cover the bag. Runner safe. Long story short, the Yankees win 5-0, end up losing that game, lose in the World Series. Series over. Dodgers are the world champions. Congratulations, everybody's a Dodgers fan. And you know what? Nothing in my life changed. I didn't lose money because the Yankees lost. I didn't, suddenly have poor health because the Yankees lost. My wife didn't leave me because the Yankees lost. My children didn't stop loving me. My grandchildren didn't stop loving me. That's called perspective. It's a game. I love the Yankees. I wanted them to win. But when the game was over and the Yankees lost and they lost the World Series, I went to bed and I went to sleep. I woke up the next morning and nothing in my life had changed because the Yankees lost that game. That perspective is important. And it's important in those moments of mostly the things we endure in life, or, those small trauma moments, got in an argument with somebody, something, car breaks down, or we have an unexpected expense. These are all small trauma things that happen to all of us in life. And, the important thing is to have that perspective, because that perspective will keep you from dropping down and staying there. The key is to at least get back to here. And the admirable thing is, like with Mike and Kelly, they went through the loss of their son Carter and came back even stronger. Made more changes, made the life better for other people. They made just incredible, inspirational choices. Listen, I think about Jim Abbott. Jim Abbott was born with just one hand, and loved baseball and wanted to play baseball. And everybody told little Jimmy Abbott, you can't play baseball. You have to have two hands to play baseball. Two hands on the bat, one hand in the glove, one hand to throw. You have to have two hands. You can't play baseball. You only have one hand. And he begged his dad to go out in the yard with him day after day after day and play catch. And so he would catch the ball, toss it in the air, tuck his glove under his armpit, catch the ball with his bare hand and throw it. And his dad would throw, pop-ups to him, if you will, ground balls, toss the ball directly to him. Jim Abbott worked at being able to play baseball with one hand. And Jim Abbott ended up going to the University of Michigan on a baseball scholarship. He won an award. I don't remember the name of the award, but the NCAA every year gives an award to a senior for being the best collegiate athlete in the nation. Doesn't matter what sport. Could be a wrestler, swimmer, track and field, football, baseball, basketball, whatever. And Jim Abbott won that award as a senior at the University of Michigan. He played on the U.S. Olympic baseball team. He was the starting pitcher in the final game where we won the gold medal. He was the number one draft pick of the California Angels. And in 1994, one-handed Jim Abbott threw a no-hitter for my beloved New York Yankees. And I remember that game. Did that with one hand. That's resilience. That's what resilience means. That's how resilience looks. Jim Abbott could have said, I want to play baseball, but I'll never be able to play baseball because I only have one hand. But he didn't. He was resilient. He didn't let the fact that he only had one hand define him. He didn't let the fact that he only has one hand hold him down. He didn't see himself as a victim. This was about mental toughness. Sure, I'm at a disadvantage, but that doesn't mean I can't compete. That doesn't mean I can't play, and it doesn't mean that I can't become good. And he did. He became really good. He is today a motivational speaker, probably not as good as me, but he's a better baseball player than me. So he has that over me. Now, I've never heard him speak. He's probably terrific. He certainly has a unique story, one that I don't have. I can tell stories about flying on a plane and getting hit by a bolt of lightning, but I can't tell stories about throwing a no-hitter in the major leagues with only one hand. But that's resilience. And so all this focus on mental health, I think we're aiming at the wrong target. I think we need to talk more about mental toughness and resiliency, and leaders need to show how that looks, what that means. We as leaders have to be resilient. We have to be optimistic. When we have come to that fork in the road, we have to make good choices of, okay, we may not get the outcome we wanted, but we can't just lay down and cry and not keep moving forward. We still have to fly the plane and land the plane safely. Surround yourself with those strong relationships. Encourage your team to build those strong relationships with one another at work. And build those relationships around optimism, by the way. Be careful of those relationships that are built around a common theme of victimhood. It happens. And quite frankly, that's nothing more than a clique. That's not helping anybody. So build those strong relationships like Mike and Kelly did. They had those strong relationships that when they lost their son, they leaned on other people. They leaned on, Rick and Sue, that's Kelly's mom and dad. They leaned on, their friends. They leaned on their pastor. They leaned on people who, would love them and help them through it and care for them and pray for them. And so lean on those relationships and then keep that perspective. No matter what it is, no matter how tough it is, there's somebody who has it worse. Whatever difficulty you're going through, there are people out there who have it far worse. Maybe you're in a bad relationship and there's fighting and arguing going on at home. But there are people who are in relationships where there's physical abuse. It's not to compare your situation against others, but keeping that perspective that hey, listen, this may be tough, but it won't last. There's that old cliche, tough times don't last, but tough people do. And there's a lot of truth to that. I think we need to focus more on resilience. In 2020, we taught our entire nation that we're all victims, that we have to go home, that to be afraid, to stay away from other people, to stay 6 feet apart and don't overpack any one venue and wear your mask and all those other things. And we're learning now that some of those things were not based on science, and some of it we don't know. We're going to make the best decisions we can. But what we did was we created this sense of giving up, this sense of fright and this sense of fear, and we sensationalized the bad. You couldn't turn on the TV without watching the ticker telling us how many more people died there. Listen, I lost my father December 13th, 2020. My father went into the hospital with COVID and pneumonia. He had COPD, and they sent him home. He was home a couple days, got worse, went back to the emergency room. They transported him to the Cleveland Clinic in Akron, Ohio. And within a couple of weeks, my father was gone. And man, I love my dad and I miss my dad every day. And so I understand, but what we were going through that, in 2020, but it's 2025, and our resilience is needed more now than ever before. And I don't see enough of it. I see an ample amount of victimhood and focus on what we view as unfair. We got to stop. We've got to stop. Leaders, be resilient. Teach your team to be resilient. Mental toughness counts. It matters. It's real. It's valuable, and it helps. And you know what? And I talk about this in, I have a seminar. It's entitled The Steps to Creating a Committed Team. And one of those steps is for leaders to be resilient, because your resiliency inspires other people. When we got hit by that bolt of lightning and our pilot said, we're going to be okay. Let's get this thing turned around. Everybody stay focused on your job. Let's get this pig landed on the ground safely. And we did. It was inspirational. When Mike and Kelly went through what they went through with Carter, and to watch what they did next, all these years later, it inspires me today. I'm inspired by their resiliency, their ability to deal with it and get through it. And, when I walked into a coffee shop and I met this young man's mother 2 years later and shared the story of what I said to her son and what I did to try to help, that inspired her. Leaders can inspire that. And when leaders are inspiring those that work for them, they become really committed. They become committed to the cause. They become committed to the team. They become committed to the mission because they're inspired by the leader. Little boys all over the country were inspired. Little boys and girls were inspired by Jim Abbott and his story, which is why he's out there, as a motivational speaker, like myself, sharing his story. Anthony Robles, who they made a movie about, had one leg and became an NCAA champion wrestler with one leg. That inspires people. Leaders who are resilient inspire the customers, they inspire the team, they inspire their family. And, watching my son go out there and give his best every Friday night, in high school, they called him Donnie Bones because they said when he hit you, there was nothing left. He buried you like a bag of bones. And so he became Donnie Bones. He would hit you and break your bones. And to this day, he's still, he's about to be 40, and they still call him Donnie Bones. And one of the most talented tattoo artists I've ever seen, by the way. If you're looking for a tattoo and you're in the Raleigh market, Golden Coils Tattoo Shop in downtown Raleigh, ask for Donnie Bones. He'll give you. He's an incredible artist and an incredible business owner, and he'll give you a good tattoo. Trust me, I know from experience. I won't let anybody else put ink on me except old Donnie Bones. But watching him go out there and give his best every Friday night, and come out short, his ability to come back the next week and work even harder, that was inspirational to me as his father watching that. So leaders, understand that when you're resilient, you're inspiring other people. So, help your team not to fall into learned helplessness, because nobody wins when we see ourselves as helpless to do anything about our situation, helpless to do anything about our outcome. We could all sit around and tell stories of times where life didn't go the way we hoped that it would go. But we get through it because we don't fall into a state of helplessness. So, I hope that you enjoyed this session. I hope that it inspired you in some way, made you think. And you know what? I hope you'll share it. I hope you'll tell other people, watch this podcast, because I think this is a message that millions of people need to hear. because I think we're on a short supply of resiliency in America, and resiliency is a very, very valuable thing. Thanks for tuning in. Until next time, I'm Bill Nye. Thank you for joining me. Thanks for tuning in to Leading Your Culture with Bill Nye. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, like, leave a review, and share it with your network. And remember, this podcast is proudly brought to you by Multifamily Media Network, your trusted source for stories, trends, and insights in multifamily living. I appreciate you checking out my episode. I'm Bill Nye, and this was Leading Your Culture with Bill Nye.